Namaskar. Welcome to this session. We are supposed to reconsider, take a resume of 8 alternatives which Vyasa discussed in course of his commentary. About describing the adarshanam, because the darshanam is means of Vivekakhya or means of liberation rather. And then what is adarshanam? So Vyasa discussed this concept of adarshanam by mentioning the alternative connotations. So we are going to have a resume of it in brief so that we can consolidate with that part of commentary. The first one out of the 8 alternatives is the one which says that the gunatrayas, the sattva, raja, tamo gunas, having power to be operative. So, the very power of the gunatrayas to be operative itself is adarshanam. That is called gunadhikaram. So he says gunadhikaram itself is adarshanam. That's the first alternative meaning of adarshanam. The second one is the non-production or non-coming up or absence of drashta drushya vivekam bhedadarshanam. So in the indistinction has not been set aside. Non-production of the distinction between drashta drushya itself is adarshanam. So that is the second meaning, optional meaning. The third is the Bhoga-Apavarga prayojanam. Bhoga-rthata, Apavarga-rthata, prayojanam, purpose in the gunas. So when the gunas have still the purpose of the nature of bhoga and apavargam, that itself is adarshanam. That is the third connotation. The fourth one is with reference to deluge, Pralayakalam. In Pralayakala there is myavastha. There is equilibrium of gunas. The 3 gunas are in equilibrium. And that is called pradhanam in Sankhya. So pradhanam is myavastha of Pralaya Avastha. That itself gives rise to modulations of Prakriti, which is Mahat, Ahankar, Tanmatra, Panchamahabhuta, Indriyas, etc. And that Pradhanatvam itself is adarshanam. Then in the fifth alternative connotation, the pradhana in gunasamyavastha, in pralayavastha, it has sthitisam, potencies of constancy, steadiness. And that itself is adarshanam. So sthiti samskars and gati samskars are the two samskars which are there in the primordial matter as discussed during the delineation on the commentary. So the fifth option says that appearance of sthiti samskaras, that means appearance of pralayam, appearance of deluge, itself is adarshanam. Then in the sixth one, the very darshana shakti, that is Buddhitattvam, that itself is adarshanam. Because Mahat is the first mutation of Pradha Tattvam. So after deluge, when the creation commences, the first phase of creation is cosmic intelligence principle. So that Buddhitattvam itself is adarshanam. Then in the that means darshana shakti or Buddhitattvam itself is adarshanam. In the seventh alternative connotation, Prakrutinistha and Purushanistha ajnanam, that itself is adarshanam. And the eighth one, the objects capable of presenting themselves itself is adarshanam. So these are the 8 vikalpas which Vyasa has discussed, and we saw them during the last session, previous session. And then he presents a brief kind of comment on these. And he says, Tatra vikalpa bhutvam etat sarva purushanam gunanam samyoge sadharana vishayam. So all these alternatives, the 8 vikalpas mentioned, except the fourth one, the other ones are something where the Purusha has guna samyoga generally. So they mention samanya samyogam, the general connection or contact or association or conjunction between Purusha and Purusha Samanya and the Prakriti. Therefore, they don't become the typical and specific and particular cause of adarshanam, because they have samanya lakshanam and not vishesha lakshanam. So therefore he says that means he implies that the fourth alternative which was suggested, which is Pralayaka myavastha, the equanimity of the gunas during deluge, where there is seed form of avidya, that itself is the vishesha lakshanam. Because this adarshanam has cause with something primordial matter. And we know that this adarshanam has been declared as something which is anadi, beginningless. And there the Prakriti Purusha Samyoga, which is caused on the onset of creation itself, is adarshanam. And that's why avidya is said to be anadi. And this connection or conjunction has ontological base. And the others are resultant associations between Prakriti and Purusha. So the Swa-Shakti and Swami-Shakti Samyogam has something to do with the ontological status of Prakriti. And that is why she implies that the fourth of the alternatives is the one which is the Samyoga spoken about in the sutra. Saswami Shaktyoho Swarupopalabdhi Hetu Samyogaha. So it's not Swaswami Samyogam, which is adarshanam, but Swashakti and Swami Shakti Samyogam is adarshanam, and this is really worth taking note of. And this is what the sutra is trying to tell us. So, with that, Vyashti Buddhi and Vyashti Purusha, the individual self and microcosmic Prakriti, that is touched by the adarshanam. So, there ends the inquiry of describing what is adarshanam. The other samyogas are samanya samyogas, which are resultant, and this samyoga that we discussed as the fourth option is the first and primordial samyogam, and that is why that is the cause, because there is particularity in it. So with that, actually the discussion on this sutra comes to an end. So Vyasa gives an enunciation to next sutra. Yastu pratyak chetanasya sabuddhi samyogaha. That means it is individualistic microcosmic buddhi which has conjunction with the pratyak chetana, that is the individual self. And then why is this caused? Why is this samyoga caused? So the next sutra 2.24 is coming to mention that. Tasya hetuhu avidya. That samyoga, which is primordial first cause of conjunction, original cause of conjunction, or the so-called anadi cause of conjunction, beginningless cause of conjunction, the cause of it is avidya. Avidya is that klesha which we discussed right in the beginning of the sadhana pada. So, the 2.24 tells us, Tasya hetuhu avidya. Tasya. Tasya means that buddhi purusha samyogam. That buddhi purusha samyoga has a cause in avidya, or the cause of that samyoga is what is called avidya as the klesha. So in the 2.23 sutra, the previous sutra that we just now considered, it began virtually at the sutra, heyam dukkham anagatam. And therefore, we came across the entire process of Patanjali's description, and we came to the Sutra 2.23. And now the 2.24 Sutra is telling us that the hetu, the cause of such conjunction, is avidya. So the conjunction has been mentioned, the nature of conjunction has been mentioned, the cause of conjunction is being mentioned now. So this avidya is ajnanam as popularly understood, or it is jnanabhavaha. It is absence of jnana. But that is not precise. In philosophical system, where the discussions have greater depth, postulations have greater depth. Now this avidya, there is a negative prefix in the form of a to vidya. So it is not absence. It is not a thing of the nature of absence. What is called abhava rupa padartham. Because we were told in the beginning that avidya is not nescience as it is understood, or lack of knowledge as is understood, absence of knowledge as is understood. But we have seen that it is a knowledge. Avidya itself is a knowledge. It is knowledge as we described it as perverse science. Not nescience, but perverse science. Not lack of knowledge, but knowledge of the nature of something very opposite to reality. Like Patanjali has described it in the Sutra on Avidya, taking anatma as atma, taking anitya as nitya, taking ashuchi as shuchi, and taking dukkha as sukha. So it is kind of knowledge, but then we see that it is perverse knowledge. There is a perversion in it. So it is not jnana bhavaha. It is not jnana bhavam. Or it is not ajnanam. This is what we need to understand here. So what is it actually? It is absence of yathartha jnanam and presence of ayathartha jnanam. So it is wrong knowledge, false knowledge, opposite knowledge, not absence of knowledge. It is viparyatmaka knowledge. There is a viparyaya, and therefore it is viparyayatmaka knowledge. In viparyaya, in illusion, don't say that you did not have knowledge. You have illusory knowledge in illusions. So also it is viparyaya here. That is taken to be, that is note to be taken off here. Now this avidya is pravaha rupa. It is flowing right from the onset of creation. And during Pralaya, it just goes for temporary latency, absence, that's all. Otherwise, it is flowing kalpa after kalpa after kalpa after kalpa. So it's a pravaha rupa. So it's a flow. It is anadi pravaha rupa. But it is santa pravaha. It is beginningless. But however, it has an end. In Pralaya Avastha, in deluge, there is anabhivyakti of avidya. It is only anabhivyakta. So it doesn't mean it is non-existent. It is only anabhivyakta, non-manifest. So it is essentially there, quintessentially there, but not manifest. So in Pralaya Avastha, in deluge, it is only non-appearanceable, not non-existent. Um, so we can't say that avidya is destroyed. With entire destruction, uh, macrocosmic destruction, the whole macrocosm will be destroyed. The whole creation will be destroyed. Nothing remains, but avidya remains. So this is a point that is to be noted. It doesn't become nissattaka. It doesn't become non-existent. So whether it is samesti, what is called as macrocosm, or vyashti, what is called as microcosm. So whether samesti or paramesti, the Prakriti Purusha Samyoga is some form or the other is there. So in Pralaya Avastha it is potentially there, and in Sarga Avastha it is actually there. That is all. No, in no case you can't have a position that it is not there. You can't say it is non-existent. So that is something that we need to take note of. So what is this avidya? Avidya is therefore called as vasana. Avidya is vasana. As a matter of fact, it is cause of all vasanas. So anatmasu atmakhyati is the avidya, the source avidya. Because from here the other avidyatmak facets come up. If you look at the sutra, anitya shuchi anatpasu nitya shuchi sukha atmakhyati avidya. So the anatmasu atmakhyati, taking the non-soul as a soul, is actually the quintessential form of avidya. And it is basic viparita vasana. It is fundamental viparita vasana. And then other phases of avidya open out, like anitya su nitya and dukkha su sukha, etc. They come later. So the other aspects of avidya are absent in deluge. You can't say that the dukkha is considered as sukha even when there is a deluge, nor ashuchi as shuchi when there is a deluge, or anitya as nitya as deluge while it is a phase of deluge. But anatmasu atmakhyati is still there. So anyway, in brief, therefore, Vyasa says, viparyaya jnana vasana iti arthaha. Viparyasta jnana vasana. It is not viparyasta jnanam, but viparyasta jnana vasana. Now, this is important to be again noted. Otherwise, we might end up casually saying that it is viparyasta jnanam. It is not viparyasta jnanam, it is not illusory jnanam, but it is vasana. It is potency of that itself. Now the question can come up in the wake of what has been discussed so far. Why does avidya come up? Why does the avidya come about? So the cause that has to be mentioned is buddhi purusha samyogam. The buddhi purusha samyoga is the cause of avidya. what Patanjali has described as anatmaso atmakhyati. So, this samyoga is causal and avidya is effectual. So, subtle aspect is to be noted here that the samyogam, buddhi purusha samyogam is causal and avidya is effectual. But then, does it not go against the postulation that so far we had that avidya is anadi? That means it is causeless. So, in order that such stand should not come up in the discussions of with the philosophical system, the avidya has been mentioned as vasana. So it has been considered vasana rupa. Avidya is vasana rupa. And therefore avidya cannot be getting karyatvam. It cannot become effect. Although the prima facie view was the purusha samyogam, purusha buddhi samyogam is causing avidya, then avidya becomes effect. So in order that such stand should not come up, avidya has been expressly mentioned as vasana. And therefore it doesn't get karyatvam, but it gets karanatvam. It becomes causal and not effectual. So the avidya that was there in previous creation has come in this creation. It has flown into this creation, the present sarga, and then it will be continuing in this sarga if measures are not taken, and again it will reappear in the next creation cycle. And you should be aware of this fact that the creation cycle is of 8.64 billion years. So, in the previous cycle, the avidya was there as a vasana. And then, in the deluge phase, which lasted for 4.32 billion years, it remained in a potential state. And then it appeared once again with the onset of present sarga, present creation phase. And if measures are not taken, it will stay there until the end of this cycle and onset of next deluge, and again it will remain in potential form. So it only goes back into pradhanam and comes back from pradhanam. And that really is causing buddhi purusha samyogam. And this clarification you can find in both Tattva Vaisharadi of Vachaspati Mishra and Yoga Vartikam of Vijnana Bhikshu. Let me quote Tattva Vaisharadi of Vachaspati mentioning Sargantariyaya avidyaya swachittena sah niruddhaya api pradhanesti vasana tad vasana vasitam cha pradhanam tat purusha sanyogini tadrushimeva buddhim srujanti evam purva sarge iva iti anaditvat adoshaha. So it has been existing in all the previous cycles. Therefore, that there is that anaditvam, beginninglessness. So avidya is said to be anadi, beginningless. And therefore it it gets causality by itself. It doesn't remain as a defect, but it becomes causal by itself. Because in the statement that we considered, even in deluge, avidya, vasana remains intact, even in that deluge. And therefore, it appears in the form of buddhi purusha samyogam in following cycle. Vartikara has an alternative expression here when he says, Sargantiriya avidyayaha swachittena sah niruddhayaha pradhaneva vasana sthitataya vasitam pradhanam tat purusha sanyogini tadrushim eva buddhim sujati iti anaditvat na doshaha. So even after deluge, we will commence our life and manifestation or incarnation based on our previous incarnation at the end of the last cycle. Despite such a long break of 4.32 billion years because of deluge, because of Pralaya Avastha, the accounts are not closed. Karma accounts are not closed. Same karma account is maintained in our avidya, and with the onset of new creation, we will commence our manifestation or incarnation, which is still connected to our previous incarnation, although that might be 4.32 billion years ago. A long lap of 4.332 billion years, still we will not be having a fresh start at the beginning of each cycle. The point is, in Pralayaka also the avidya vasana is vidyamana, it is existing, and therefore the Purusha doesn't get the mukti by the cycle ending at the end of the kalpa. So this is again clear in Vyasas' comment when he says, Viparjaya jnana vasana vasitocha na karya nistham purushakyatim buddhim prapnoti. So all the whole creation has ended on the point of pralayam or the deluge. Yet, since Vivekakhya has not appeared, the gunas do not lose their power. They continue their activity even after onset of creation. Now, how is the karya samapti going to take place for gunas? When are the gunas going to stop their functionability? That even with a deluge and such a long lapse of time that we are not going to incarnate for 4.32 billion years, then why the gunas, and when the gunas are really going to face the karya samapti or end of their purpose? So it is only going to happen when the buddhi is occupied by paravairagyam. And when paravairagya dawns, then the gunas will lose their power to work and they will retire. So the gunas don't retire with respect to each of us, even with the onset of deluge. But it only happens when paravairagya is attained. That means the means for liberation are attained, it doesn't happen. So therefore he says, sadhikara punaravartate. With adhikara, the gunas will appear in the next cycle of creation. So we have to understand the terms, technical terms such as sadhikara and samapta karya samapti. So when adhikara is there, there won't be karya samapti. This is to be noted. Their purpose will not end even with the creation going to rest for a long time, which is of the order of 4.32 billion years. The buddhi would be having punaravartanam. It will come back from where it was 4.32 billion years ago. So satu purushakhyati paryavasana karyanistha prapnoti. So when does the prakriti or gunas face the accomplished condition? Purushakhyati paryavasanam. So when ultimately they bestow purushakhyati, sattva purusha ananda khyati, it is then that the karyanistha will be ending. So then Vyasa tells us, charita adhikara nivrutta adarshana bandhakaranam abhavat na punaravartate. Charita adhikara, once the buddhi becomes charita adhikara, that is accomplished in purpose, there would be no bandhakaranam. That will be end of bandhakaranam. And then when the bandhakaranam ends, then there won't be punaravartanam. There won't be reincarnation or reappearance in some manifestation. So at this stage we have to be familiar with concepts such as charita adhikara, karya vimukti, so that we can understand how the liberation comes about or salvation comes about. So samapta karya, that is charita adhikara. So buddhi, when it becomes charita adhikara, samapta adhikara, then there is no bandham. All bandhakaranam will be set aside. And therefore there will be sanyoga bhava, absence of conjunction, which was mentioned. And with absence of conjunction, there will be emancipation, liberation. Now, there is a cavil raised up here. It is like this, very interesting cavil. So when the buddhi will go away, the liberation will come about. When the buddhi will go away, the liberation will come about. The buddhi, which is, because it has no purpose, Bhoga-Apavarga, both the purposes are served. So the buddhi will go away. The chittam will go away. When the chitta goes away and then comes the liberation, so somebody makes a cavil here. He says this is like an important person telling his wife, my dear, I will definitely give you an offspring after I pass out, after I pass away, after I die. So it is something like that. The chittam is going to go away and then the liberation is going to come. So this is something amounting to a thing which is like an important person who could not give a child to his wife during the lifetime, promising that he would certainly give a child after he goes away, after he dies. So the chitta going away is going to give liberation, is something like that. So Bhashyakara has quoted this. He says, he quotes the prima facie view. Mugdhaya bharyaya abhidiyate. Innocent wife of an important husband very innocently says, Shandaka Arya Putra Apatyavati me bhagini kim artham nam aham iti satamaha. My sister has offspring. My sister has children. How come that I do not have children? So, the important person ends up saying, Bhrutaste aham apatyam utpadayishyami iti. My dear wife, I will certainly bless you with a child after I am dead. So this interesting Shandapokhyanam comes in Vyasa Bhashya. So because it is similar here, Tathedam vidyamanam jnanam chitta nivrutti na koroti vinattam karishyati iti ka pratyasha. If the chitta while existent, if it is not going to give liberation, what chance is there that after the chitta goes away, that there would be moksham or nirvanam or kaivalyam? Of course, this question has been raised up by a Nastika and a cavil which has been indulged by a Nastika. So the answer is, the very going away of chitta itself is liberation. Not that liberation will come after chitta goes away, but very going away of chitta itself is liberation. This is what Patanjalas are postulating. Chittanasham itself is liberation, and not that the chittanasham is going to result into liberation. So this is how it has been answered. So let us consider this commentary on this sutra in our next session. The sutra that we are considering is Tasya Hetuhu Avidyaha. And in that sutra we have come to this point that Chittanasham itself is liberation and not Chittanasham causing liberation. So anyway, we will proceed on this topic in our next session. So, namaskar all of you.